นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอภารุธาเดสังอมัทสทาวราเยโสรวันธาบมุญจันทุสทังSo this is the full moon of March, and we have a week left of this retreat. That doesn't mean you don't stop practicing. So the retreat is, that's one thing about monastic life is it's part of a lifestyle, isn't it? Sitting, standing, walking, lying down, the eating of food, the wearing of the robes, the whole thing is to encourage mindfulness. So it is a quite skillful lifestyle, to put it in the modern jargon of lifestyle. I think of everything, the whole function of the temple, the Buddha images, the ceremonies, the chanting, the tradition, the robes, the alms bowl, the meditation practices, the sila, and all the rest are for developing, cultivating awareness in daily life. And usually on like a meditation retreat for lay people, give a 10-day retreat, and then the last few days everybody starts asking, well, how do we practice when we go home? Because the meditation retreat center, you've got everything set up. It's kind of spoon-fed. Everything is nicely arranged so that the schedule is arranged. All you have to do is come and follow the schedule. And the cooks prepare the food, and then what time do you get up, what time when you go to sleep, and sit, and then walk, and then like so. Many ways, just having everything in one's life arranged by somebody else makes life much more simple, much more easy. With so much life is having to have so many options and choices and pulls and duties, responsibilities, that one is constantly caught in this trying just to make decisions, choose this over that. So that's why it's lay life is has more distractions and more pulls outward. Everything in modern life now is to draw us outward, to spend money, to make money and spend it for the economy, for the free market. You should never be content with what you have, because you always can improve. So advertising is all about trying to convince you need something better than what you have. So recognizing this, that it's not a complaint, but just or grumbling about it, but just recognizing the society we live in is like this. And there's so many options, alternatives now in a wealthy country like this one. This must be quite a experience going to a supermarket and just deciding what salad dressing you want or what soap powder. I remember, all these kind of shopping centers and that developed while I was locked away in the monastery. I became a monk in 1966. So then when I came to live here in the UK, I stayed pretty much in monasteries. And one day somebody took me to a shopping center in Watford, called the Harlequin Shopping Center. And I was just curious to see what it was like, because I'd never been in one, really. So he took me in, and it was, dazzling, the lights and the displays and all the things, and, there to look at. And I felt overwhelmed by it. I wasn't used to such impingement, all coming at me at once. I'm not particularly, country bumpkin, but I was just thinking how strongly that just a few minutes in that shopping center, I wanted to leave. Rows upon rows, marvelous things for sale, and then coffee shops and sweets and restaurants and everything, all in this remarkable place. And it's probably not it's probably kind of ordinary shopping center. We've got, vast ones, I hear, in the United States, some that are just enormous. So it does, notice how things do affect us. When we have too many things come at us all at once. And of course, if you've been living here for, monastic life in monasteries for years, and then you go into these fantastic shopping centers, it's overwhelming, because your senses are all very much used to them. More subdued life, monastic life, as we experience it here. But awareness allows us to witness the way it is. It's not, it's not a matter of making value judgments by condemning the world or shopping centers or whatever, or free market capitalism. Not up to me to pass judgment and get obsessed with that, but to recognize how things do affect me, because this I can actually do. This body, mind sitting here, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body itself, and the thing, the way the sense world impinges upon it. This can be observed. So this is like mindfulness, is putting oneself in that center point, that still point in the center, that embraces everything else, where we're not just caught in just reacting to things, trying to resist or get hold of, or just be overwhelmed heedlessly. We can be overwhelmed mindfully. Means that we feel overwhelmed, but there's awareness of the feeling. with mental confusion. I remember never liking to feel confused. I like to always have the idea that I should be very clear in my mind. And when I became emotionally confused, I found that very distressing, and tried to suppress the confusion, get away from it, trying to make my life so that I feel, that I don't have that feeling of confusion. So it's either right or wrong, good or bad. It's what should or shouldn't be. You want to have opinions and views, certainty in your life, makes you feel confident and safe. But confusion is part of the human reality, isn't it? When so many things impinge on us at once, well, how can it not be otherwise but confused? When so many things happen to us all at once. So the simplicity, modern life seems to me incredibly complex, complicated, and in meditation is moving out of complexity, not suppressing it, but just by realizing the reality of awareness, puts us in that simple position of witnessing. And so the confusion and complexity we might experience due to changing circumstances can be observed. It's like this. Feeling insecure, confused is like this. And that was quite an insight for me. I remember when I had it, the feeling, it's so obvious in its own way, but then I realized that my personality was one that felt confusion was wrong. I shouldn't be confused. I don't like the feeling of being confused, overwhelmed by anything. I like to have everything kind of nicely laid out and have things come one at a time. Not everything come at me all at once. This is very difficult. So people start speaking to me all at once. Confusion. First you, and then you have some control over the situation. When you start thinking about the world, Bernard Jones, who we've been chanting for, who died last week, he was like Kun was his friend, and Pang said Bernard was one who really worried about the world. And I remember Bernard used to write me letters, quite long letters, about his concern for the political problems of this country, or the starvation in Africa, or the Israeli-Palestinian problem, or Church of England, or anything. There's so many problems, and in this kind of, that once you grasp these worldly conditions, then it pulls you into this intensity of feeling and distress and concern. And I don't think Pang was able to teach Bernard meditation. Because there was, this was Bernard was one of these very kind of very nice kind of gentlemen who especially felt for the underdogs, for the poor, for the unfortunate. So this is, these are good qualities, but yet it's a hopeless problem, isn't it? If one's life is just caught in these worldly concerns, because there's no end to them. 50 years ago, I remember we were supposed to, by this time, have solved all the problems. We were so naive and optimistic back in the 1950s. And we thought, I remember, medical science would have a cure for every ailment. We'd already conquered TB. We had antibiotics to cure pneumonia. Before, when I was a child, when you caught pneumonia, it was very serious. Children died often from pneumonia before the antibiotics came into existence. And then TB was no more a problem. And then smallpox, measles, the whole lot, everything was, we're finding vaccinations and medical cures or preventatives for everything. And cancer was definitely going to be cured. By this time, they should have found a cure for all cancer, or completely annihilated cancer from the planet. And now, 50 years later, there's more diseases now than we ever had back in the 1950s or that we knew about. There was no HIV/AIDS in 1950. Plus all the allergies and all kinds of ailments that didn't seem to exist, or that I recall ever being mentioned or problem. So this idea that if we get, if we straighten out the world, modern science, medical science, modern technology, democratic government, all the rest, we'll be able to live on this planet, extend the lifespan, and we can improve the species, maybe designer babies. We could manipulate the genes and so forth to get, so that every baby that is born will be perfect. So this is kind of perfect, the best of humanity. These are the kind of fantastic fantasies of faith in modern science and progress. That was very much the dominant attitude 50 years ago in the United States. And so now we find that that the world, no matter how much we improve, as it certainly standard of living is much higher now than it was then, and when the people can, most people can afford to buy cars and refrigerators and televisions and laptops and everything. These are not just the property of the wealthy. And I remember a few years ago I was in Calcutta, and it was a very crowded city, and this was, they've kind of cleaned it up a bit, but this was maybe 15 years ago, and they used to have terrible pollution in Calcutta. So when it started getting dusk, you look out on the streets, and all this kind of yellow, kind of like the color of the robes, this kind of pollution would be hanging around in the streets. But yet in those days, in India, they didn't import automobiles, so they just had these ambassador sedans and a few taxis. And still, there were traffic jams and traffic problems in Calcutta. So I was with a friend of mine, Indian friend, who lives in Calcutta, and And I said, won't it be wonderful in the future when everybody in Calcutta has their own private car? And then, imagine that, all these millions of people trying to move their cars to the streets of Calcutta. You couldn't move, you'd just get stuck. So the idea of having your own car and all these hopes and expectations, ambitions of human individuals for progress and improving time-saving technology. And now people talk about being stressed out all the time. They've got all these time-saving machines to live with. Then about 12 years ago, I went to a conference, World Fellowship of Buddhist Conference in South Korea, and the bhikkhuni that used to be with us, Vairojana, she took me to see her monastery, which was out in the mountains. This beautiful Umungsa convent, it's only for nuns, Korean nuns, and it's a very ancient place in a very beautiful setting, and the neatest, cleanest, most well-ordered monastery I've ever seen anywhere in the world. The level of impeccability I've never seen it reach the standard that I saw at Umungsa. And they had about 250 bhikkhunis, and there's more of like a training monastery, study monastery for newly ordained nuns, and they wore these little white kind of slippers, and you'd be walking through this complex of beautiful buildings, and there'd be the rows of these white slippers, perfect alignment. Not one was out this far. They were all perfect, even like this, in rows, 250 pairs of white plastic slippers. That's how they train nuns in Korea. And I was very impressed by the Bhikkhuni Vairojana took me to where they washed their robes, and they washed them in the river. They didn't even have washing machines or anything. The bhikkhunis all had to go out, wade into the cold water of the river, it's really cold, and do all their laundry there. And but their robes are impeccable. They starch them, and they're very stiff, and made me feel I was really sloppy. Felt really sloppy there. The Theravada robe. Felt like an old tramp. Walked in. Everything just perfect. Just beautifully aligned, beautifully maintained in every way. And yet their life was very simple. They didn't seem to take to modern technology very quickly. And so the life there seemed quite simple and well run. The abbotess, the head bhikkhuni, couldn't speak English, so it was hard to communicate with her. But she was very impressive. Just her presence, and she seemed a woman about 50 years old. She wasn't that old, and she seemed quite had a kind of balance of discipline, strictness, and compassion. So the place had a good atmosphere. It wasn't, even with all that neatness, cleanliness, order, sometimes that could be oppressive. If you've got a tyrannical mother superior that browbeats you into order, then you create an atmosphere, a very negative atmosphere. But this everybody seemed quite joyful and happy there. So that really impressed me, to see, a kind of strictness, sternness, discipline, but it wasn't oppressive, wasn't tyrannical. And life was quite simple there. And Bhikkhuni Vairochana said that most of the nuns, bhikkhunis in Korea, say the best years of their lives are when they were studying at Umungsa. Then they have to leave. They can only stay there so long. It's like a college or something for training. I found the same when I went to Wat Pah Pong. When I first ordained as a bhikkhu, it was very simple. It was, in those days there was no luxury. It was all very basic, primitive lifestyle, but very simple. And I found that, just that simplicity of just living in that way was quite pleasant. I've been brought up in the kind of middle class attitude of, if I don't have electricity, what will I do? If I don't, we need this, we need that, and going to a place where life is so primitive, I wouldn't be able to stand it. But actually found I quite liked it. Wasn't miserable. It wasn't painful. So, and reflecting on this, just how the simplicity of life is something that can be easily lost, because the society now is so complicated. Everywhere, not just here, but everywhere. And there's so many problems, and there's so much poverty and corruption and enormous population, world population, and all kinds of, and terrorism and so forth. It seems like the problems of the world just seem to get more and more. And the wealthier you get, then the more complicated you become, because your what you expect, your expectations go up, and your standard of living, progress, all these are part of the aspiration for progress, making things better all the time. So this has an effect on our conscious experience. The infinite choices, varieties, options, possibilities. When life is narrowed down more to just something very simple, then we learn to, we adjust to that. And that makes the kind of material side, the worldly side, much more easy, just like a meditation retreat, 10-day retreat. Here, just having the retreat center managers organize everything, and the cooks and the food is purchased, and you just eat what they cook, and you take the bed that you're assigned to, and you follow the schedule, and then the meditation is watching the breath, inhalation. It's quite easy, isn't it? Very simple. And mindfulness, then being aware, isn't complicated. It's not complex, fantastic kind of attainment. But then we began to notice how complicated we can make a meditation retreat. Because we sit there and we don't have to worry about cooking the meal or this or that. But then all the unresolved feelings, problems, emotional habits start rising up into consciousness. They're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to Amaravati 10-day retreat just to get away from the rat race of London. Go up into the Chiltern Hills and sit there and find peace, commune with nature." And you're just sitting there, and then the mind produces all kinds of worries and fears and problems. And one finds, one's getting irritated by the person sitting next to you. Or and I remember, the battles that go on about the ventilation of the Dhamma, of the meditation hall, the retreat center. I used to watch one retreat I was giving that somebody'd come and open all the windows. And then the rest would come, and then somebody'd close all the windows. And then somebody'd get very upset and open some of them. And then another one would close them. And then out of the fresh air, those who want fresh air and those who want warmth. And these can be, bring up, feelings of murder sometimes, isn't it? Just something like that. Somebody opens the window and the cold air is blowing in on you, and one can feel incredible desire to murder that person. But the aim of the meditation is not to have the perfect meditation hall, and where the temperature is perfect, and even though that's nice if you can have it, or where everybody is the way you want them to be. Everything that fits your ideal of what you want, so you can really meditate. And you'll probably never find such a place. So the aim of awareness isn't to try to perfect the external world, but to learn from it. From the way it is. So like on a meditation retreat, one is trying to make it as simple as possible, as within the possibilities that we have here. In terms of making it so that you don't have a lot of, you're encouraged not to go out or to talk and chat, spend the time socializing. The aim is for looking inward, so that you're in a hall, maybe the meditation hall with maybe 40, 50 people there, but it's not to socialize and chit-chat, but to support each other in this endeavor of awareness, meditation, bhavana. So then the only thing that we're really called upon is to be aware, bring attention to this present moment. Simple, isn't it? Mindfulness is the ultimate simplicity. There's nothing more simple than that. Jhanas are not so simple. But mindfulness is. So this is where it's what I've been on this in the morning reflections and things like that. It's just reflecting over and over what, awareness is the way, is the path. It's and to recognize it, to spot it, to notice, and that's through paying attention. Right now, and observing, not controlling, not trying to make your mind the way you'd like it to be, or not trying to practice in order to achieve some state that you've read about, or or renew some experience you've had before. But if that's what you're doing, to be able to see that, the way that we can approach meditation from the idea of progress and trying to get something we don't have, or get rid of what we have that we don't want. So this awareness of this witnessing, the puto, the knowing of this is the way it is. This desire to get something is like this. Desire to get rid of something is like this. Confusion is like this. Wanting to murder the person that opened the window is like this. And there's no judgment in it. I'm not saying you took the precepts, panadibata, you not intentionally murder anyone. But then you can feel guilty about feeling the desire. Thinking a good Buddhist would not even have that thought. But sometimes these thoughts do arise, and the conditions there, we're being totally frustrated, or people are being insensitive, or doing it deliberately. We can even be paranoid, saying, he's doing that deliberately to torture me. I know it. I've heard meditators say that. Build up a whole scenario about somebody who's there, who come on the retreat only to make their life miserable. That's paranoia, isn't it? But yet sometimes it feels like that. So, whether you want to call it paranoia or what, but the important thing is to be aware that this is what it is. So when I just notice confusion, it's like this. Like with Jitanupassana, insight into states of mind, this sense of confusion, discontentment, dis-ease, just vague kind of negative emotions, anxiety, worry, restlessness, this dullness or sleepiness, that these can be seen from this puto position just by bringing it into consciousness, noticing it's like this, feeling dull, feeling despair or depressed or whatever is what it is. It's like this. And in that way, then, we're allowing a condition that has arisen to cease. We're not getting rid of it. We're not destroying, annihilating anything. We're allowing the natural flow without me interfering with it because I don't like what's happening, or I want something else. So, in awareness, this is awareness and consciousness. When we're mindful,
purely present, then consciousness is still functioning. But it's also acting like a mirror for awareness. Because the consciousness, then things arise accordingly to conditions, the happiness, unhappiness, hope, fear, anxiety, confusion. And the awareness is then not judging the condition, not trying to, not reacting to it, but letting it be in consciousness, so it arises and ceases. So this is to notice, to be that aware, where your awareness, mindfulness connects, is a flow, is not just fragmentary or momentary, or just flashes of awareness, but where you actually recognize awareness to the point that you can sustain awareness, or it sustains itself once you recognize it. You don't have to make it, you don't have to sustain it personally, but just recognizing this is awareness, unattached to anything. And then the conditions will come and go. And you reflect on, when they're arising, when they're ceasing, the flow and movement of mental conditions, emotions, thoughts, memories. Now, consciousness is usually is identified with the five as the fifth khandha. So, in the Pali canon, of course, vijnana is used in different contexts. So this is in the five khandhas. It's about the attachment to the five khandhas is the cause of suffering. So, when consciousness is the natural vehicle that we're experiencing, this is a conscious realm. Consciousness is the result of being born. We're conscious form. So we're experiencing consciousness from this form, and then we get confused because we think of consciousness is limited to this form, and we then when we try to be mindful, then we wonder what is it that's aware then of consciousness. Is awareness consciousness, or can you be aware of mindfulness, or? So in this respect, this is not putting consciousness as an object, but recognizing. Mindfulness brings us into the reality of consciousness, which is not attached to anything. We're not, caught in desire, trying to control, trying to get rid of. We're no longer caught in the illusion of a self, which we interpret experience always from this is happening to me and what I think and feel about this, approve and disapprove. The awareness is not, is not a creation, a personal creation. It's the natural state of things. It's Dhamma. It is the gate to the deathless. It is the way that within this complexity of the five khandhas and the six ayatanas and all the mental proliferations, habits and karma of how many previous lives, who knows what, the complexities of these fascinating individuals, just endless permutations and convolutions of conditioned phenomena rolling on, how can one not be caught in all that complexity? Self is a complicated thing, isn't it? The ego is complicated. And me as a person, then it gets into complications. I'm a complicated, complex personality. And so on that level, I have a lot of memories, lived 70 years, so I remember a lot. I don't have Alzheimer's yet. And I'm waiting though. Every time I can't remember something, oh, here it comes. And then what I like, my tastes, my preferences, my prejudices, my aversions, and my views and opinions, this makes me into a very complicated person. So when I experience life through my personality, then I suffer a lot. Suffering is me, definitely. Dukkha is me. Because that's the way the self operates. It's so fragile, so easily offended, so upset. When I can't get my own way, when things aren't going the way I want, when I have to be in situations I don't like, when I have to perform duties I don't want to do. And even when I'm doing what I want to do, then there's a worry that I'm not doing it well enough, or that somebody else could do it better, or that I'm going to be blamed for something. How many of us live our lives with the fear of being blamed? Because we're blaming society, aren't we? First something happens, we say, who's to blame? We want to blame somebody. And you hear it in the modern politics, isn't it? It's trying to, who's to blame for the Iraqi mess, and all that, who can we put the blame on? And so the society is one of praise and blame, critical society. It's masses of information available. Everything is complicated now. We know too many things. We have so much information. There's so many options for distraction. So many opportunities. So there's a complexity, and on this level of the society and the personality that one has. These are complicated. So before I became aware of the value of mindfulness, then I suffered a lot. Not that life was unfair or brutal to me. I just suffered because of the problems I would create. Nothing was just what it was. Everything that I did, thought, said, imagined, was judged in some way, would become much more than that. There'd always be blaming, either blaming myself, blaming somebody else. There'd be the fear and concern and obsessions that one creates through experience of life, through the force of habit. So then the opportunity to become monk arose. I was living in Malaysia at the time and went on a holiday to Thailand and decided that's where I'm going. I'm going to become a monk there. So then this brought me into the where I had the opportunity to develop awareness. When I first started meditation, before I became a monk, one of the temples in Bangkok, and I didn't know when they talked about mindfulness, but I really didn't know what mindfulness was. I thought it was samadhi, really, concentration, because they taught very concentrated technique. So that this concentration, that being mindful means to do everything in this very slow motion. And so that's what you have to do to be mindful, is just move very slowly. And so I tried to develop. The technique only worked when I was in the monastery. I was also working, teaching English at one of the universities, so I couldn't walk that slowly at the university. Then I had to relate. If I'm teaching English, I've got to speak to people and relate to so many things. So I thought it's impossible to be mindful at the university. You can only be mindful at the monastery when you're sitting there with your eyes closed and nobody's bothering me. Because even though, the mindfulness, that's how sati is translated generally into English, and I thought I understood it, I didn't really know what it meant. And I didn't know the reality of it. So much of the early practices were developing concentration. I just, I'd be going to wanting to develop concentration by, closing the eyes, being in a controlled situation where there was no demand, not much complex impingement on me, and where I could, concentrate the mind. And slow movement helps to concentrate. You can get, just through walking very slowly, that kind of walking practice where you do just by increments. If you keep doing that, you get very concentrated that way. So then, as I started getting more, contemplating the results of this, and became more familiar with the teachings of the Buddha in the Theravada, because before that I never really knew much about Theravada, and my experience before was reading about Zen. So then I began to, this mindfulness, how could it be dependent on just doing everything in a controlled situation, doing anything in slow motion? Can you be mindful running for the bus? If the monastery catches on fire, should I walk slowly and mindfully out of the monastery? I might, or can you just, run out of the monastery yelling fire and still be mindful? These kind of questions. Because I began to see mindfulness was, the Buddha was teaching a way of living life, of moving, of being conscious, that wasn't dependent on conditions being any certain way, being peaceful and tranquil or chaotic and confused. Because he was pointing to the liberation, freedom from suffering, nibbana, which isn't a state dependent on conditioned phenomena, being any certain way. So it became aware that if that's that like these concentration practices made me very dependent on to get the tranquility, get the jhanas, one had to control the situation a lot. I couldn't get the jhanas teaching English at Thomas Hart University. So, obviously, but could I be mindful while teaching English? So these are the kind of questions I'd ask myself, and then through the years, when I began to really recognize this is Sati Sampajanya. And this isn't dependent on conditioned phenomena. It's just paying attention here and now. It's not a created state. I don't make myself mindful. It takes no effort. It's just letting go, really, of opening, observing, being present. And then in that state of awareness, it's a natural state that isn't created, so it sustains itself. It is what it is. And when you recognize awareness, then it's a matter of realizing and recognizing. In the Four Noble Truths teaching, the first two Noble Truths are using suffering, dukkha, but the third Noble Truth is about cessation. That's where the insight into the awareness, the what arises ceases. So the cessation, mental condition, if you trust your awareness, whatever you're feeling or thinking, remembering, will cease in consciousness. It's still conscious. And that consciousness then it's not attached to anything. It's not trying to get rid of it or make it into something else or exaggerating or proliferating, but just recognizing. So in the scriptures they talk about consciousness and attachment. Now this is the state of avijja, ignorance, of the Four Noble Truths. When we talk about avijja, what that really means in the Pali scripture is ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. It doesn't mean illiteracy or anything. When we use the word arahant in Theravada, it means that's the having had all 12 insights into the Four Noble Truths. And so like there's 3 aspects to each truth, and there's 4 Noble Truths. That's 12 insights. So one time I remember down at Chitters years ago, I said, "Do you know what an arahant knows?" I gave a talk one evening. "What does an arahant know?" And it knows suffering. Arahant knows suffering. Suffering should be understood. Suffering has been understood. Knows the origin of suffering, should be let go of, has been let go of. Knows Third Noble Truth, cessation, should be realized, has been realized. Knows the Fourth Noble Truth, the path, the Eightfold Path, should be cultivated, has been cultivated. I mean, so these are just putting these words in the context of the essence or the essential teaching of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths. And these words like Nibbana and Arahant, these can be, these words lose their meaning because they become superlatives on a personal level. If you attain Nibbana yet, then are you an Arahant? And things like this, so that the whole thing of a self, my personality, is never going to be enlightened. My personality is a habit pattern. And it's like the brick, you can't make a mirror out of it. It's just not meant to be that way. But the awareness, we're not the personality. The personality is a condition. It's conditioning that arises and ceases according to other conditions. You're not the same person, are you? When you're at your job, or you're in the meditation hall, or you're with your parents, or with your best friend, or alone. I mean, the personality adjusts itself to depending on the conditions present. So the awareness then is this flow, allows the flow of consciousness to reflect the conditioned realm. And so then we develop wisdom, panya, from that, from discerning. Consciousness with attachment, consciousness without attachment. So we can be conscious and attached, we can be crazy, mad, drunk, and we're still conscious, but with attachment. Or consciousness unattached. You know, this is subtle, because the society we live in, everybody is conscious, except for those that are unconscious, but attached to all kinds of views, opinions, scenarios, hopes, fears, anxieties, worries, duties, ideals, resentments, angry men, angry women, blaming, resenting, being jealous, scared of death. And so our conscious experience is fraught with complexity. And modern life, with all its high tech and all its kind of miraculous technology, not to put it down, but it doesn't help in encouraging us toward awareness, because we don't need technology for that. We don't need anything, any instrument, any aids of any sort other than your own attentiveness, willingness to observe the way it is now. So, from the stress of modern life and to the simplicity of awareness, the deal with stress or complexity is not really a problem if you really recognize awareness and cultivate that awareness. So in the Fourth Noble Truth, the insight is to cultivate or develop awareness from samadhi, right understanding. So that right understanding is the reality of awareness. And through that, then that's called bhavana, translated as developing or cultivating. So the bhavana really begins with the Eightfold Path, the developing awareness. So the Buddha put this ordinary experience of all human beings suffering as the First Noble Truth, taking us through paying attention, examining, investigating dukkha, we realize, we recognize the way of non-suffering, which is the Fourth Noble Truth. Now, as you cultivate this more and more, it's like you just see, like the world around doesn't change. You know, you still have your karma to live through. Your karma ripens, and things happen. So, things you like, things you don't like, Things go very well, things don't go very well. You feel healthy, you feel sick, and on like that. But the awareness is if I, on a personal level, there can be suffering when things change the way I don't like. On the level of awareness, there's no suffering, because the awareness doesn't create suffering. Ignorance creates the suffering by being caught into, this is happening to me, it's not fair, I don't like this, it shouldn't be this way, you're to blame, and on like that. Then that is the suffering. That's the dukkha. If I stop doing that and trust in the awareness, then you're feeling, but you're open, but your relationship to the reactions to experience is one of awareness and non-attachment rather than attachment. So when people ask me about, when somebody disrobes, and say, well, how do you feel, and, it must be terribly difficult for you and sad, and it is, it's sad and it is what it is. But my refuge is in the awareness of that, not in attaching to the sad feeling. One still experiences grief at loss, the sense of loss of somebody that dies or leaves, but the awareness, one isn't indulging in that. One isn't attached to grief as a self anymore. So it's not that awareness makes you insensitive and not caring. Doesn't matter. Let him come, let him go. Don't feel a thing. But you do, you feel, but the feel, because this is the nature of feeling. This realm is a feeling realm. But also it's the suffering. The suffering is not wanting this to be like this, not wanting this feeling. Not wanting myself to feel like this, or not wanting you to leave and disrobe and things like that. Then it becomes the self attached consciousness with attachment. So when I see the recognize the reality of non-attachment, it isn't non. It's not that I don't have any more sense of sadness or loss as experience, but is non-attachment to it. So I don't create. This realm is like this, so all that arises, ceases. What is born dies. Old age, sickness, death, grief, sorrow, despair, and anguish. These are just normal feelings that are part of human experience. So Buddhism isn't trying to not feel any of these, or to kind of wipe that whole experience out of consciousness, but our relationship to it changes from identity, ignorance, identity, attachment, to understanding and wisdom, non-attachment. So I offer this as a reflection for this evening.